The idea of keeping animals for human observation began long before the creation of what we now call a zoo. Ancient kings and emperors once kept private collections of exotic creatures as a display of power and wealth. These early collections were not open to the public, but were instead symbols of royal authority. They were called menageries, and they could be found in ancient Egypt, China, Mesopotamia, and later in Europe. These menageries laid the foundation for the concept of a zoological garden. One of the earliest known examples of such a collection dates back to around 3500 BCE in ancient Egypt. Pharaohs gathered animals like lions, giraffes, monkeys, and exotic birds brought from distant lands. These animals represented divine power, and the rulers believed they could harness their strength and symbolism. Priests and servants took care of them, though often under harsh conditions. This early form of animal keeping marked the beginning of humankind's fascination with living creatures beyond their homeland. Thousands of years later, similar practices appeared in ancient China and Mesopotamia. In China, Emperor Wen of the Zhou dynasty created a large park filled with animals known as the Garden of Intelligence. It served both as a place for study and as a reflection of harmony between man and nature. Meanwhile, in Mesopotamia, rulers kept lions and other fierce animals to show bravery and divine favor. None of these were zoos as we know them today, but they inspired the later idea of organized animal collections. During the classical era, the Greeks and Romans continued this tradition, but added their own purposes. Collected animals mainly for entertainment and combat in arenas. Elephants, bears, and big cats were captured and forced to fight for the amusement of large crowds. Although cruel by modern standards, these displays increased people's curiosity about wildlife. Over time, scholars began to take interest in studying animals, which would eventually help shape the scientific motivation for creating a true zoo. The Middle Ages saw menageries return to royal courts across Europe. Kings and queens kept exotic animals as diplomatic gifts and signs of prestige. For instance, in the 13th century, King Henry III of England kept lions, leopards, and an elephant at the Tower of London. These creatures amazed visitors but were often poorly treated. However, this period also saw an increase in exploration, meaning that more new animals were being brought to Europe from faraway lands, sparking greater fascination. The Age of Enlightenment in the 17th and 18th centuries transformed the way people viewed nature and animals. Scientists began to study animals not only as curiosities, but also as subjects of biology and natural history. This intellectual shift laid the groundwork for creating a space where animals could be observed for education and research rather than mere amusement. The goal was to understand nature and teach the public about it, which would eventually lead to the idea of a public zoological garden. Before the establishment of the first official zoo, private animal collections became more organized. Wealthy naturalists and scholars began to catalog and study their animals systematically. They recorded feeding habits, behaviors, and habitats. These studies influenced the growing interest in conservation and animal welfare. As many realized that keeping animals alive and healthy required proper care and conditions, the first institution recognized as a true zoo was the Vienna Tiergarten Schönbrunn, established in 1752 in Austria. It was created by Emperor Francis I, the husband of Empress Maria Theresa. Originally, it was a royal menagerie built within the gardens of Schönbrunn Palace. Unlike earlier collections, this one was designed with circular enclosures and paths that allowed visitors to walk around and observe the animals in a planned layout. It represented a new level of organization and design. The Schönbrunn Zoo began as a private royal collection but slowly evolved into a public attraction. By 1779, the gates were open to the general public on certain days, marking a major step in the transformation from royal menagerie to public zoo. This event showed that animal collections could serve not just as private treasures, but also as educational and recreational spaces for society. The organization of the Schönbrunn Zoo also reflected the growing interest in science. It employed caretakers and naturalists who observed and recorded animal behavior. The arrangement of the cages was more thoughtful, grouping similar animals together and attempting to recreate parts of their natural environments. This approach reflected Enlightenment values of order, observation, and rational design. Over the following decades, other European cities took notice. The idea of creating zoological gardens for both study and public enjoyment began to spread. In Paris, after the French Revolution, the royal menagerie at Versailles was transferred to the Jardin des Plantes in 1793. This transformation marked the birth of the Menagerie du Jardin des Plantes, one of the earliest public zoos open to all citizens, not just the elite. The Paris Zoo had a strong scientific foundation. It was managed by naturalists who wanted to promote education and research. Unlike older menageries, the Paris Zoo did not focus on entertainment, but on understanding animal anatomy, behavior, and adaptation. This shift inspired many other nations to create their own zoological gardens with similar goals. The process of building these early zoos required great effort. Animals had to be transported long distances, often by ship, in dangerous and difficult conditions. Many did not survive the journey, and the ones that did were kept in simple cages. Over time, as knowledge about animal needs increased, enclosures became more sophisticated, offering shade, water, and sometimes vegetation. These changes represented the first steps toward humane treatment and environmental awareness. London soon followed with its own major institution, the London Zoo, established in 1828 by the Zoological Society of London. At first, it was intended only for scientific study and was open to members of the society. However, in 1847, it opened to the public, allowing ordinary people to see exotic animals from across the globe. This made it one of the first zoos designed for both education and public enjoyment. The London Zoo introduced many innovations, built specialized houses for reptiles, fish, and birds. It also created a zoological garden design that influenced the construction of future zoos around the world. The animals were not just displayed, were studied and documented. Naturalists used the zoo to advance scientific understanding and publish findings that helped shape modern zoology. The establishment of these first zoos also depended on changing attitudes toward exploration and empire. European countries were exploring and colonizing vast parts of the world, which gave them access to exotic species. Explorers, traders, and naturalists shipped animals back home, often as symbols of discovery and power. Although modern values question this practice, it played a key role in supplying early zoos with diverse animals. As the 19th century continued, the purpose of zoos evolved further. They became educational centers where visitors could learn about geography, biology, and nature. The design of cages slowly changed from iron bars to open enclosures surrounded by moats or glass, allowing animals to appear more free. This new style began in the early 1900s and was inspired by the desire to make zoos look more natural and less like prisons. By then, the idea of a zoo had spread across continents. Cities in America, Asia, and Africa began creating their own zoological parks, inspired by the European examples. The focus shifted more toward public education, animal health, and conservation. Zoos started to hire veterinarians, zoologists, and educators. They became institutions of learning, combining entertainment with science. Looking back, the process that began with royal menageries turned into a global movement that changed humanity's relationship with animals. The first zoo represented more than a collection of creatures. It symbolized the beginning of scientific curiosity and responsibility. Over time, zoos moved away from displays of power and toward centers for preservation, reflecting a moral and intellectual evolution. Today, the first zoo, Schönbrunn in Vienna, still stands and remains operational. Recognized as the world's oldest zoo, it represents centuries of progress in animal care, scientific study, and public engagement. What began as an emperor's private collection became the blueprint for a worldwide system of zoological gardens that continue to inspire.